Welcome to Diagnosing Dx, the podcast giving diagnostics the platform it deserves. While therapeutics and devices often take centre stage, diagnostics is the engine driving precision medicine. I'm your host, David Filby, and each week we spotlight the innovators, breakthroughs, and real-world challenges shaping the future of DX. Pregnancy testing has barely changed in half a century. Women are still told one thing, whether they are pregnant or not, and then left waiting weeks before they receive any meaningful clinical support, even though life-threatening conditions like ectopic pregnancy and preeclampsia can develop during that gap. This week I'm joined by Dean Remy, co-founder of Mativa Diagnostics, who believes it's time to replace today's test and guess model with an entirely new standard of maternal care. We discuss the future of connected diagnostics, why data and not tests will become the biggest asset in healthcare, and how Mativa plans to transform pregnancy care from a single result into an ongoing patient journey. Welcome to the show this week, Dean. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing fantastic in spite of the heat wave we're entering in right now.
I should probably say welcome back, because you're the first person to return to the show, which is awesome. What's really interesting is the first episode we did together, we were really plugging into your experience around raising capital in diagnostics, because of it's something you've been heavily involved in and has been an incredible challenge in the industry. And now you're back representing one of the most exciting companies in women's health diagnostics to come through. So not for my benefit, but we should probably ask you to introduce yourself, because
Sure.
This will be the first time some people have met you. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Spent the last 35 years navigating what I'd say is sort of the intersection of diagnostics, biotech, and therapeutics. Witnessed obviously a massive evolution of diagnostics in we'll call it in the research or medical space, but definitely in therapeutics, where they become a lot more precise and targeted. And, it used to be, when I looked at it, it'd kind of be very routine, but the diagnostics at home just did not move, especially in the women's health space. So I saw a glaring stagnation. So I realized we had the technology to do so much more than the current approaches for the current standards of care. And so that is become my real current focus is on the maternal health space and trying to revamp its approach.
Awesome. And so what is your current role and who with?
Yeah, so I'm with Mativa Diagnostics, a company that I've helped co-found and launch. We've got a small team. I'm still doing the team build and the advisory board build on it, but we're pioneering the next generation of pregnancy care. We're not just building another task, we're building really a connected maternal ecosystem, kind of moving the industry away from what I often call the test and guess model to a new standard test, track, and take action approach. So our platform will integrate really an advanced handheld device, looks sort of like this guy here, with an AI-enabled mobile app and instant care navigation. So we don't just tell the woman she's pregnant, we're simultaneously flagging early risk factors for life-threatening conditions.
Wow. And so why is that needed in maternal health, and where's maternal health now? What's the sort of the unmet need and the need there?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is the standard of care, the over the counter type pregnancy test, it hasn't changed in 50 years, right? Slightly better antibody, slightly more sensitive. We now have little digital plus minuses that are put on top of it, but that's because, people would have a tough time recognizing, a band's presence or absence, much like we went through with COVID, right? So the idea was, the technology as is passe. We don't need to recreate the wheel with something that is less successful. And so as a result, we think because those tests being binary, we've routinely left women in the dark about critical early risks, such as ectopic pregnancy and preeclampsia, during the most vulnerable weeks of their journey. So that was the first part of what we want to address, but we also know that the current system sort of isolates women, creating a massive gap in that maternal mental health support area. So a positive test that brings anxiety to women, our goal is to not leave them left behind to navigate the next steps alone.
Interesting. So there's a lack of information early in pregnancy, and then it's leaving women in what is an incredibly stressful period of their lives to suddenly try and figure out the navigating of what next.
Yeah, you said it very, very well. What's known as the 6 to 8 or sometimes 6 to 10 week gap from the point a woman tests positive to when she might get her first visit with the OBGYN. That's when a lot of those risks will present themselves, especially ectopics. So, to wait for that 8-week ultrasound to happen to identify risk, it's no longer acceptable. We have the technology today to take early action, test, and save lives. So we're fixing this problem by connecting, the diagnostic event immediately to our free maternal ecosystem, which will make introductions to care clinics, physicians, OB/GYNs, and other, ensuring that, we support them both physically and mentally, but also with information and access to the care that she's going to need.
Yeah, super interesting. Where does the science come from originally? Because you mentioned you co-founded the business, but what's the sort of background of the business and where does it come from?
Yeah, great question. So we licensed IP out of UPenn and the Wistar Institute. One of the individuals is highly recognized with his work on biomarkers and formulaic algorithms in the ectopic pregnancy space, but also preeclampsia as well. He's a practicing OB/GYN, runs a large clinic associated with UPenn Medical Center. And we saw this IP as incredibly valuable, but not such that we would want to, recreate a simple piss on a stick type of model. We felt, if we have great IP, let's attach great technology and great understanding and capability to that platform. So we have launched with that IP. We partnered with firms, one out in your neck of the woods, to help develop our graphene nanosensor-based technology. So we wanted the technology to be the most sensitive possible. We still wanted it to be a urine-based pregnancy test with these risk factors built in. So we wanted to go with the most sensitive potential technology and something that we can make, quantifiable for sure. As we're going to go for our class 2 de novos with device, assay, and software as a medical device, I wanted to make certain that we had the best-in-class testing platform. The other nice thing is it'll enable us to avoid some of the things that are a little more challenging, such as the antibody supply part of traditional testing methodologies. And it also allows us to do complex multiplexing. So that means we can do upwards of 10 biomarkers at the same time with extreme sensitivity. So being able to do that right in your own home, it doesn't stop at just the sensor. You have that with the AI-enabled app, and it translates that complex biomarker data into clear, guided clinical pathways for the young lady.
Wow, that's super interesting. And actually, I think the more we talk, there's loads of things that make what Mativa
for sure
are doing in more interesting than the average, diagnostic test trying to be commercialized. So, give me a bit of insight into where you guys are now and what you're currently trying to achieve.
Yeah, so we do not consider ourselves having to do proof of concept data any longer. We've got 10 years worth of study data on these biomarkers in serum. We'll move forward with an LDT, partnering with a large clinical reference lab to do that. But for us, we know from most recent studies that we did that our biomarkers are indeed present in urine. So for us, redeveloping what that algorithm, predictive algorithm, is going to look like in urine and in, a complex environment of women from all parts of the world, early morning samples versus late day urine samples often behave differently, which we recognize from the clinical lab space that I was in. So we plan on building out a maternal biorepository that is first in class. We're looking to collect close to 4,000 individuals longitudinally followed throughout pregnancy, and for some number of collections post-delivery or the pregnancy's natural end. And then potentially even integrating some samples from the newborn as well. It'll be a massive biorepository. We intend to be close to or top 1 million cryopreserved samples in all, full omics data, full patient histories, full chemistries. It's going to enable us to validate MVPs 1, 2, and 3 for the test chips. The device itself is reusable. So when they purchase a test kit, our goal is to have it as an off-the-shelf pharmacy available item, in the $18 to $24, $26 range. So, very palatable in cost. And they can use that device over and over and over again. So the chips are sort of the razor blades in the razor blade model. And she can order additional test chips like pregnancy maintenance to make sure that things are still, moving forward as possible. It will also include additional preeclampsia biomarkers as well. We're also intending to build a gestational diabetes chip, an STI chip or sexually transmitted infections chip, and a drug of abuse chip. So different things that could potentially negatively impact the likely success of that pregnancy are all things that we plan on creating chips around. And the woman has the luxury of just being able to request more, or request different chips via the app, and they show up in her mail a few days later, so she can run the assays in the privacy of her own home. So for us, we're running a lot of concurrent programs. We'll be running the hardware design, the assay chip design, the software as a medical device design, the biorepository site enrollment, and everything build out is all going to be run concurrently. We've already vetted out the various partners we're going to use. And have all these numbers really solid. So the budget is also quite solid around running this company as virtually as possible throughout probably regulatory approvals for sure.
You're going big. I think it's fair to say you're going big, right?
Yes.
So where you are now is at the end of development, prototype, and we'll come on to raising capital next, but there's so much to unpack here. So everything you're saying in terms of what now needs to happen and running it concurrently screams that's expensive, right? There's a lot to build. Even so, let's take it piece by piece.
Yeah.
The biorepository.
Yes.
This is a big part of the business, and
yes.
What currently exists in terms of biorepositories around maternal health at the moment, or is this a first of its kind that can be used for years and generations to come as it grows to help predict and develop and innovate for future breakthroughs in maternal health?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, our concurrent pathways, it's a big mission, but our mission is simple, right? It's to provide smarter, safer start to every pregnancy.
Yeah.
The biorepository is going to help us ensure that we have best-in-class assays, that we've been able to discover novel biomarkers, just because there have not been a lot of really good biorepositories in the maternal health space.
Right.
There are some that are university-driven. Often samples are brought in from, multiples and multiples of different programs. So sending quality scores to data from samples, that have been compiled from multiple studies is a challenge for sure. So for us, having a single biorepository built under what we'll say is really a very well standardized process protocol and IRB is going to ensure the best possible sample quality. And it's going to put it on par, as has been the design intent with something one would build for a therapeutic. So we're very intentional on it. Our costing will probably be close to 35 million on that, but we've already been told by several SMEs in the space, when it's all done, we have the ability to sell off that as a singular asset to a major pharma company, or if the government wanted to step in and continue the program, that could be something that would be feasible. But we're looking at a valuation of close to $500 million plus. Have some thoughts on how to increase that valuation for very little cost as well to us as an organization. So the biorepository is going to be a central piece of what we build. And that is one, to de-risk the investment of the company as a whole to VCs.
Yeah.
But the other is to fill the gap where we think there's just not been historically enough good samples, also of the breadth and diversity of sample types that we'll also be collecting at every single visit. So it really is a substantial development in the maternal space. So its value's got to be quite high.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because on my immediate reaction to that is, well, why doesn't every diagnostics company build one, right? And then obviously there's a huge expense to it, but it does sound like the underlying factor here is actually that it's really necessary in maternal health, and someone needs to do it and grab it. There's a huge gap there.
Yeah.
But is that how you guys seen it? Did you see it as actually there's a huge opportunity there and a need to build that biorepository, and then later on, did you discover that actually the value of that could be an incredible de-risking factor for the business?
Yeah, good question. I think it was a little bit of both for certain. Some of it came off of conversations that we had with some VCs, about a year ago, that said, why don't you just go after IVF organizations and buy their samples and, quickly test them out and send it off? Well, one, IVF centers typically aren't having the same issues because it's implanted. So, and ectopic is not the issue. But number two, they're typically 90%, 92% white, and they're 100% wealthy compared to the individuals that are likely to be walking into a CVS, Walgreens, or similar to pull an off-the-shelf device and test themselves. So from the former, I don't know what that data means. It doesn't validate my assays at all. We might get some quick data and we can show the FDA, and we're pretty convinced the FDA would say, is this your target market? No. So for us, it's like, let's just do it right from ground zero. But, as we started, waxing philosophical, we got phone calls from CEOs in therapeutics companies trying to develop therapies for preeclampsia as one example. And they were very adamant, like, let me know when these become available, because we know we're going to want to test. We're going to take a look at data. We want in-license access so we can test out our thesis. They may even, acquire some subset of aliquots in the biorepository. So we do know it's going to be valuable to many more individuals and firms than just us. But as part of the de-risking strategy, and where VCs historically have not played a lot in the diagnostic space, it wasn't until, we'll call it the tougher cancers and they realized that, hey, wow, there's diagnostics companies that are actually making money in this space, right? Of precision diagnostics for cancer, that the VCs started to get on board with diagnostics. And now we're trying to move it earlier in the process. Can we enable people to test themselves? So you will see currently that the vast majority of VC investments in the diagnostic space are still on serum-based assays, still require a patient to go to have their blood drawn somewhere, and that those samples get sent out for, an assay that has a CPT code. And then the results go back to the physician. So, and the woman's, kind of in the dark until somebody calls her with a result. So, or guy for that matter, for cancer. For us, it was like, how do we enable the woman with the most advanced sensitive data early on, and then that access to care? And it was only having confidence in the assays that we build, that we can sit down with regulatory and say, this is the target audience. We know how our assays perform in every situation. So for us, it was intentional scientifically, but the end, from a capital point of view, when we do spin it off as a separate asset, that's a huge win, obviously, to the early investors.
Yeah, massive. Let's talk about the commercial model, because you've talked about regular people being able to go to their local pharmacy and picking this up off the shelf.
Yeah.
What's the idea behind the commercial model, and how much emphasis is there on in sort of direct to consumer versus other avenues for the actual product itself?
I mean, obviously, pharmacies in the U.S. are largely huge commercial endeavors, right? The CVS's, the Walgreens, it's a huge amount of the ops, even the Walmarts and their clinics. So this is much more characterized as a B2B2C type of asset. So commercially speaking, we are taking this dual prong approach where we're aggressively pursuing what retail shelf space for consumer access will be through partnerships with strategics in that space of ones I mentioned previously, while simultaneously ensuring that the rigorous standards required for clinical environments are met, and our platform's able to do that. Operationally, right now, our focus is on executing our institutional fundraising strategy, and advancing, our ongoing discussions with major healthcare providers and consumer retail partners. So we see them as investment partners, for sure. A device like this, where it's not a one and done, but is actually integrated into the thinking pathway of the care that the woman is going to seek, or prescriptions she's going to want, or maternal vitamins, or prenatal vitamins, or you can add a long laundry list of the types of things, if someone is moving forward with the pregnancy or is not, that they are going to need support in, and a lot of these are provided by those same organizations. So having clear line of insight into who is looking for said service is going to, I think, resonate very, very well with these firms.
Yeah, interesting. Now, you've mentioned partnerships, and even your B2B relationships also seen as potential investment partnerships.
Yes.
How much of the business strategy, and where are the key areas where you think partnerships are really going to accelerate the model, and allow you to ultimately achieve your goals?
Well, I think the meetings with strategics have to happen immediately, and I'm already setting up conversations with these firms, because it's so much more than just getting the asset on their shelf. It is insurance codes, right? So if somebody comes in and they're under a specific health plan, and they can get discounts or get it through a physician prescription to get tested, they need to be able to do that. We also need to be able to integrate with their EHS and other systems internally, right, for data translation and share. So that is a really crucial part for us to have those conversations early on. If it's from the pharmacy perspective that I was just chatting about here, the CVS and Walgreens of the world, but it could be from the supplier to these pharmacy chains, the Unilevers of the world, and P&Gs. So I'm simultaneously reaching out and setting up conversations with those organizations as well. And they all have venture groups as well. Because again, going back, if a woman is pregnant and let's say she's moving forward with the pregnancy, there are so many other products that these firms have that are aligned exactly for that customer. So being able to then, right through the pregnancy test and app, be able to line up, like the shopping network of things that, the woman might need downstream is really going to resonate very well with these firms.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And what about things like regulatory hurdles, reimbursement pathways? How does that come into it with this type of product?
Yeah. So we were intentional about the device being an off the shelf. So we were less concerned about the strenuous nature of CPT codes and things like that from the onset, knowing that we can move forward with getting it into people's hands at a price point they can afford, and the insurance piece becomes less necessary for sure. So we're happy on that. We will partner with firms that are already producing point of care devices for OBGYNs and minute clinics and the like. Several have already expressed interest in licensing our biomarkers from us to make them enabled for their own devices, which for me is a huge win. To not have to go through that full-on point of care device manufacturing process, the regulatory around that, and then to build out a commercial team to actually get the product sold into OBGYN offices, it was not a pathway we thought that the investors would have interest in. So for us, having a very solid revenue stream from just the off the shelf, and then some side licensing value from every assay run through point of care and the LDTs, as mentioned earlier in that conversation, are going to be kind of mission critical. But also from the insurance side, and not for the sake of paying for the device, but for enabling the young lady who may not have insurance with insurance is something we've already started conversations of as well. So we do know that it is not atypical when a woman becomes pregnant, may seek to get insurance if she doesn't have it already. So we want to find some of these enabling partners, strategics that are providing said services, so that she can ensure that she's properly covered as she's going through this path as well. I don't know if that entirely answered all the points of your question, but hopefully.
No, absolutely. And so let's come on to capital, because we've talked at sort of and everything around the it's so exciting, and there's so many elements to it. And I actually love what you just said about not just chasing the traditional build out a sales force and try and sell it. And to be, I mean, obviously, I interview a lot of early stage founders, and what tends to happen is the most naive, and that's probably really harsh, but maybe a founder who's come straight out of academia, thrust into this private company for the first time, they're the ones whose business plans are the traditional regulatory approval, reimbursement, build sales team, try and compete, and it's a brutal road. Whereas every time I speak to a founder who talks about partnerships, licensing, and these things are about gaining access, widely and early, that for me always feels like a really mature, robust business plan in this field. But let's talk about capital. What's the plan there, and how do we see that unfolding?
Yep. So we just recently embarked on actually $127 million fundraise. I'm still tweaking some of the finer points of one of the components internally, but it's not going to change significantly from that. First tranche is around the 20 mil. That's going to really launch the graphene nanosensor chip build out. So actually encapsulating our capture molecules onto these, the hardware prototype of what a product that looks more like this versus, the original one looks more like, we'll just say, outdated lab toy. So for us to build something that we can prototype in the hands at user sites, because we want to test not only the assays, that's a no-brainer, but the user interface design, our strategy around really an agile development of the user interface, so that we put it out, we let folks test feedback, we make changes, test feedback, make changes, and we'll do this iteratively throughout the process. So when we get to a point of having a product to show the FDA, so here's what the software as a medical device asset looks like, and they say, what was your user interface, validation of this look like? We'll have all the data around that. Similarly, we will be setting up also at day one with the first tranche, the regulatory team. We've already got a partner identified. I've vetted many of them over the last year. Lots of experience with software as a medical device, as well as Class 2 de novos device and assays, plus EU, UK, other. So that'll help fast track our assemblage of the content necessary for international filings. And we want that built really, within the first year, so that the pipe is starting to fill with the content and information necessary for the regulatory approvals in different parts of the globe. And our QMS team, besides the regulatory team, the QMS team will be working hand in hand with that group to build out the architecture for having a regulatorily auditable infrastructure as well. And we have our AI infrastructure and data lake build team already vetted, priced, and they are ready to go. It's a bunch of current and former Anthropic designers. So they know this industry. They know cybersecurity incredibly well. They do a lot of governmental work. So for us, we wanted to have, since we're going to be working globally, it was important that we met alignments, regulatorily speaking, for our data capture, collection, and utilization. So we have to take a look at every single part of the globe and understand, are we compliant here, and here. So this will all be set up right at the onset and ready to go. So we're not going to go back like a lot of companies because they're penny pinching all the way through. And I get it. They just don't build out this infrastructure from ground. And then they have to go back and revamp how they named files, where they stored files. Do they know that this was the final iteration of a file? And especially when you've got multiples of people that are contributing to it. So for us, it was critical that we set this up properly from day zero. So
interesting. So with the 127 million, where does that get you to in the life cycle?
Yeah.
And how does that work in terms of the tranches of when you're raising that amount of capital? Are you saying to institutional investors, we're looking to get commitment for the full 127 and these are the tranches and milestones along the way? Or are you going out with that 20 million as your target with things will change to raise the hundreds? How does it work when you're in the fundraising mode?
Yeah, we're going after the full on 127. We want a lead investor, whatever that looks like. It could be individual high net worth. It could be a large family office. It could be an institutional VC. But we want them on for the long journey with us, because I always think of your venture capital partners as partners. If they're not that latter, do you really want their money? You want people that are bringing more than just the check writing to the table. They have subject matter expertise. They have contacts. So for me, that is crucial for us. So we are looking at as a total amount. Now, you asked the question at the front end, where does this get us? This gets us a regulatorily approved device. And the chips, MVP1, the pregnancy and risk chip, the pregnancy maintenance and follow-on chip, we haven't named that one yet, and the gestational diabetes chip will be in the regulatory process already. So 3 MVPs, and part of the reason for doing that is we wanted the woman to be able to order chips. If she's moving forward with the pregnancy, we want those chips to be ready to go, not in the future. So for us, it was important that we at least get those 3 in process so that we can get the product on the shelf in what I'll call a finished version of it. And it meets the needs of 95% of all the women out there.
And does that include the sort of fully populated biorepository of the 4,000 samples at that point as well?
Yeah, so the biorepository will be long done by the end of year 3. So we anticipate taking a full on 18 to 24 months to build it. We will be doing bite-sized chunks at generating the genomic, transcriptomic, targeted proteomic, metabolomic, toxin studies. I didn't talk about that one. That's a new one. Infectious studies. But then it'll also give us the ability now to go back, because we've got such a supermassive representation of women and their pathway, that we're going to see early onset preeclampsia, late onset preeclampsia, postpartum preeclampsia. I can now take 25 normal pregnancies and 25 non-pregnant and do top-down proteomics on them all, and hopefully discover some of those new novel biomarkers. So our goal has been, when we get our regulatory approval for MVPs 1 and 2, we can start advertising that the biorepository is for sale. So we're hoping to have that fully sold off by 3.5, maybe 4 years in. So that's a really nice ROI to the original investors that work with us and partner with us on this one. And, it's all in the details, but, they can either, look at it as an early ROI to their table of LPs, or we just say, here's what the anticipated B round to go after, STIs and DAUs and, maybe a new chip for the early, late postpartum preeclampsia, those new biomarkers we'll have to go to the FDA with. That B round, we might just be able to self-fund with the sale of the biorepository, and there's no further dilution of the original team. So it's a win-win for everybody either way.
Interesting. That's awesome. Dean, I'm going to ask you one last question. There's so much going on here. What are you most excited about?
I think I'm a firm believer that data is the new diagnostic. The historicity, moving forward, companies aren't going to win by simply selling these single-use test kits. They're quick to get in the market, but you don't know your user. You don't know what the result is. There's no data there, right? It's not scalable. Just sell more, but it's not a scalable technology. You can't add to it. Longitudinal data sets are going to be absolutely crucial. And we're kind of entering this period you've probably seen, but I call it care convergence, right? I think the successful life science companies are going to be, in the next decade or so, maybe less than that, they're going to be the ones like us that blur the lines between diagnostic hardware, digital therapeutics, and instant care navigation, right? So the ultimate winner, and I think we're going to be one of those, is going to be the company like Mativa that owns and supports the entire patient journey right from the moment of testing.
That's fantastic. And I think you're right. I think what you're trying to do is move away from that traditional build test, sell test model and really develop something that's truly of unique value in the size of data and the specificity of it in an existing problem, and clearly a data set that just doesn't exist in women's health. And that's really sad. I think what you're trying to do is absolutely fantastic.
Can you imagine if every pregnancy test for the last 10 years had data coming from it, right? Along the entire journey? That's what we're building here.
We had an ectopic pregnancy, and we had no idea what was going on, so,
right.
It was a really sad moment for us when it really unraveled. Right?
Sorry to hear that. And hopefully we can prevent, or at least let it not get to a point where it's life-threatening.
And we were lucky it wasn't that. Yeah, we were very lucky. Yeah, because we actually didn't even know that was a risk of what would happen. So
yeah, we're hoping that women aren't left behind just because they're not in the know. So yeah, awesome.
Dean, thank you so much for coming on and talk about this.
Thank you as well.
The whole industry should be rooting for Mativa. I'm excited to get the story out and tell it. But thank you for coming on and being so transparent and open, and we're all rooting for you.
Hugely appreciated. Thank you again for having me and supporting what we're trying to do in changing the industry. So thank you.